Are mass shootings a product of mental illness? We all have heard of them. They are terrible events that cause many deaths to the hands of evil individuals. But they are constantly made to seem that what is actually in their hands is the problem. But I do not believe in this. I believe that mental illness is the problem with our mass shootings. Now, throughout my middle school career, there have been many shootings, and in every single one of them, the media has jumped to get the story, and always about the guns and weapons they are using. And right after that, it's how we need to get the guns away from us to keep us safer. Here are a few statistics to get into the mindset before we get into the meat of the argument. 60% of mass shooters had recorded mental illness or were seen by a therapist before committing the crime. It is important to take note that this does not include the shooters that had mental illness, but it was discovered after the crime. The possibility of someone with bipolar disorder committing an act of violence is 6 to 1 compared to the common population. These numbers are also mirrored by people with schizophrenia, paranoid disillusions, and very, very bad depression. Mass murderers typically spend time planning on how to kill people they do not know and have thought processes marked by paranoia and or disillusions. In contrast, other homicides are often more impulsive, motivated by anger, and involve people they know. Now, I switched up many shooters, and I dove a bit into their biographies and found that every single one of them had a mental illness of some sort, whether it was recorded before or after the crime. And in this slideshow, I'm going to highlight 5 of them. Nicole Cruz, the Parkland shooter, had explosive temper stages, mood swings, lack of impulse control, periods of extreme paranoia, and years of therapeutic intervention. The Virginia Tech shooter suffered from anxiety disorder, depression, and a troubled and isolated childhood, which is by far one of the best incubators for mental health problems and illnesses. Adam Lanza suffered from anxiety, OCD, and untreated anorexia. Dylan Roof also suffered from social anxiety disorder, mixed substance abuse, schizoid personality disorder, and depression. Eric Harris was antisocial, narcissistic, sadistic, and had poor finding in violent and terroristic-like fantasies. This is what we're dealing with. This is a lot more than anger management problems. But now, are guns possibly the issue? So there was an interview conducted by the New York Times with Dr. Amy Barnhorst, a professional psychiatrist, who had recently had a young man brought into her office due to violent threats on social media and the possibility of him shooting up his school. But as he walked in, she didn't note any immediate mental illness flags. But here's the problem. Mental illness is not always apparent when you first meet someone. It can take a while to figure out if someone actually has a mental illness. And second of all, she said he was just another angry boy that wanted to get back at the world. But she also claimed that these other shooters were also just angry and wanted to get back in the world, which I showed before that is not the case. These are people with serious issues that need to be addressed. And even more against her point, she submitted him to a psychiatric board, which is where they deal with mental illness. Shows she doesn't believe that he just has anger management issues. And as well, this man did not commit the crime he claimed he was going to commit. So it is unfair to compare him to those that have committed the crimes, because the jump from saying that you will commit the crimes is much greater than actually committing these crimes, and shows an elevated level of mental illness that most people do not have. Now, we've also all heard the term that the United States has the most mass shootings in the world. And that rumor was started by one study. That study was conducted by Adam Langford, a professor at the University of Alabama. His study concluded that the United States had 90 mass shootings in the past 40 years, and the rest of the developed countries in the world only had about 202. The United States had about almost half of that. But there's a catch. He would refuse to release his procedure and official findings to the public, and outright refuse to give it to credible sources who asked for the information. So the Crime Prevention Research Center decided to do a follow-up study. But in what they did, what they do not think Adam Langford did, is they hired many translators fluent in many languages around the world. Because of the variable that the fact that most shootings were only recorded in local papers due to the lack of internet. So they dove deep into the archives of many countries and found that Adam Langford's study was completely false. They found that though the United States had 90 mass shootings in the past 40 years, the rest of the world had over combined 3,000. The United States makes up less than 3% of that. Yet it was Adam Langford's study that was put on the front page of the media all across the country even without his study ever being validated by anyone else. Now, how do we solve this problem with mental illness? Well, you get a doctor's appointment every year before you go to school. So why not, maybe once or twice in your entire middle school to high school career, go get a mental evaluation. Not only will this help students with mental illnesses they didn't know they had, it will help alleviate their suffering from these illnesses. And not only that, it will alleviate the stigma from psychologists and other mental health professionals and make people understand these are people you can talk to and go to in times of need. Now, if we follow just a basic path of going to people when we need help, we can have a brighter future where people with mental illnesses can be guaranteed help and mass shootings can be a thing of the past. Thank you for listening.
What do you believe is the number one mental disorder that most shooters have?
There is one that I left out, one diagnosis that I left out that was common within them, but I left it out to not help the stigma towards that one mental illness. Grayson.
So was there one country that more than yours alone, or?
In this chart, it showed that Honduras had one of the highest. Okay.
What made you choose your topic?
I saw it on the board and I was like, this is going to be fun. And
Can you explain the graph?
grab. Okay, so this is your firearms for people, and this is your violent crime rate, including mass shooting. So the United States is all the way down in that corner, which means it doesn't have as much violence per people with guns. Okay.
Do you think that most of the people that have like the previous diagnosis should still be able to own guns?
I believe that depends on the person, because it can also be a combination of even mild mental illnesses that can cause greater effects, and it just depends on what a professional says on and who the person is. Sam?
Where's Canada? Canada on there?
It's probably in this cluster down here.
Okay, thank you.
Julia?
You brought up that one study that was false, but there are also plenty of studies out there that show that the U.S. has way more mass shootings than other countries. So how do you know that the guns aren't harmful?
I would like to know where that study is, because personally I have not come across it. I've only come across Adam Langford's. Of course, if you were to show me, I would gladly look at it. Mr. Martin?
So, Kaeden, you're saying that it's we have on one side we have a gun problem, and on the other side it's a mental health problem.
Yes.
Which problem would be easier to address?
Well, it depends on which situation is going to actually solve the problem.
Which one do you think trying to diagnose mental health issues in individuals would be harder, or stricter gun control would be more
Personally,
difficult?
I believe diagnosing people with mental illnesses would be easier, because there is a black market for guns. You can get guns illegally everywhere, but it's people with mental illnesses, we can help them, and we can actually figure out, and if you were to get, say, a mental evaluation maybe once or twice in your middle school or high school career, like I was saying, we can figure out if people have them and treat them early on.
Do you think people are going to go in for these mental evaluations?
Well, it's required to get a doctor's appointment before.
So you're going to require people for?
I think it would be helpful to instate a required mental health evaluation.